policies will be added before we get to our policy updates from the North Carolina School Boards Association. Item 3 on our agenda is an approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes?
Surely have. So
All right.
moved.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Yes. A second.
Okay. All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
There is, in the minutes we had, if you go back up just a little bit, Ms. Joy, it incorrectly identifies Michelle Cornegay as a Laney High School assistant principal. She is an Ashley assistant principal. You passed it. I mean,
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
We can make that correction.
okay.
We can make that correction. I'll take your word for it. I didn't notice that, but thank you. So is everybody okay with the changes as amended?
Yes.
All right. So Mr. Wildebohr, is your motion then to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
All right. Is there a second?
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion? Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Aye.
I also vote yes. The motion is agreed to. Minutes adopted as amended. The next item on our agenda is policy updates from the North Carolina School Boards. I'm sorry, our policy updates, our own individual internal policy updates.
Yeah, Nelson, before we begin, I just wanted to welcome Richard Cortan, or no, oh, I forgot now. It's Cortran. I'm sorry, Richard, from College Park Elementary. He's the assistant principal representing NC Papa. So I apologize for butchering your name. We just talked. So welcome and thank you for your participation.
Yes, thank you very much for being here this morning. All right, so our first policy update is policy 6140. That would be student wellness. We've had this policy in committee now for some time. I'm certainly looking forward to moving it forward before the full board. Not sure. I think Ms. Varnum might be the best person to begin with here and sort of take us through this. Maybe offer just a brief explanation on why it's been held so long.
Are you talking about me or Julie?
Ms. Varnum. I always begin with our staff.
So yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
So policy 6140 did require the School Health Advisory Council to streamline goals and overall, capture the full scope of kind of the whole child wellness process. And so then it also did require them presenting to the board what their recommended goals were for board adoption as a part of the policy, because the current goals will be listed in the policy.
So to that point, looking at what we have right now, that it's my understanding that the upper box in the header is going to be deleted prior to us moving this forward. That's just so that won't be part of what we're approving. And then I didn't have this policy in, well, I'm not certain. Ms. Joy, can you scroll down, because we do need to put into the policy the written words. If you notice in section B and then again in section D, it has a place to insert any additional goals as far as nutrition or physical activity goes. But but it also states in the policy if we have any other requirements that we want. So Ms. Joy, I had sent you the language and I typed it, and now I can't get back to my screen that had the language in it. So, but I don't see it on what you're scrolling by. Okay. Yeah. If you can just click on. And all I did, Julie, was I took the goals that they presented to us at the work session and I inserted them in section A because that is where we talked about the School Health Advisory Council. And Okay, she'll scroll up just a little bit. And so I put those in the right above the last paragraph. I took the liberty of adding under after school health advisory council, SHAC in parentheses, so people understand that we kind of use those terms interchangeably. Ms. Joy, keep scrolling down a little bit so you can get to the part where I put those goals in. Okay, right there, the red. So I said, using the whole school, whole community, whole child model as its basis, the council, in conjunction with the school board, has established 3 overarching goals for the district that are to be customized at each school. Number 1, student. And it could be students. Over the next 3 years, work to align health and PE class sizes with other core courses. Number 2, staff. Cultivate a culture supportive of adult social emotional learning. And number 3, community. Align with community partners and task forces focusing on some or all of the WSCC, which is the whole child, whole community, whole school model. So those we didn't vote on them at our work session, but we generally agreed to them by consensus to put those in. So this is where I thought they fit best, because they didn't really fit under nutrition. And the only one that would fit under PE would be the student. But the school health advisory team really felt strongly that they wanted to do the whole child model and have a goal, a student goal, a staff goal, and a community goal at the district level and at the school level.
I have a question.
Sure.
So under where it says the goal for over the next 3 years, work to align health and PE classes, how does that work policy? Because if the policy continues, so it has to be an end date. So should that be like in the strategic plan versus in the policy? The policy can say, whatever, but then I think your strategic plan to manage that, it needs to be in your strategic plan. I just don't know how to put that in a policy to say over the next 3 years.
And I'm fine with that. This and Julie, excuse me a minute, jump in if you need. But apparently this policy is one of those ones that we are supposed to review every year to see if what we wrote as a goal is still there. And if you read through in Appendix A, I mean, they really were very specific in goals that, districts were picking, such as, you will have, 20 minutes at lunch, you will have snack packs to go, physical education, you will participate in fun runs. So we chose not to go that specific at the district level. So, but I would have no problem with taking over the next 3 years and just say work to align. And then in our strategic plan, we can put that in there if that makes more sense for management in the district.
And if I could throw in, I gotta stop right there, because as a former physical education health teacher back in my heydays, and having classes of 55 or 60 kids in health class, I gotta say, Ms. Crable, I think what you've written needs to stay in there, because it's been going on. My wife was the head of health and physical education for New Hanover County for 7 or 8 years, and she worked very hard to get that in. So, I mean, to take it out that quickly, I think it needs to stay. I mean, just because this is something that's been worked on since, I started in 1986 in New Hanover County Schools, and because as I spoke to the lead health and physical education teacher for the county, she is a big proponent of teaching 50-50 health and physical education. So to be fair to the teachers, I don't think it's fair to say, well, we're going to do it, and hopefully somewhere down the road we'll get it done. I like the idea of having a timeline, having it end here, have it in policy. We can also have it in, let's do it in multiple areas, and not just sit there and come back and say, well, hopefully we'll do that down the road. I mean, I like it in the policy. I like it in the strategic plan. and maybe we can finally get to it. I mean, my wife worked very hard on it. I've tried my best over the years to try to get something like this in here. So I would not concur that we should pull that out. I think we need to leave that in.
So I think, Pete, what you and I are saying are the same things. I agree. It's not that I disagree with you. This is a scheduling issue, and we need to make sure that our school leaders understand that 70 kids, 40 kids in a PE class should not be, oh, I'll just drop you into a PE class because everyone's got to get in it. What I'm saying is, instead of saying over the next 3 years, like, how do you manage over the next 3 years in your policy? Because if it's say, I mean, the wording just needs to say, I would think that PE and health classes will resemble the core classes or whatever, because we don't have a core class with 70 unless it's like orchestra or something to that nature. I don't even think that's appropriate. I don't know, but I think we just need to work on the wording of it.
I was going to, I'm sorry, Dr. Powell. I was just going to suggest that we will work to align health and PE classes with other core courses, or our health and PE classes will align with other core courses.
Well, and Mr. Boyer, I would agree with the second one. The first one, I mean, as I think the point I made, and maybe I didn't make it clear enough, is we have worked to align health and physical education classes to core classes for 25 years, 30 years, but it's never happened. So, I mean, if we don't have an end date, we're still working. I hate to say it, we're still working on it. And 10 years from now, we'll say, hey, we're still working on it. We'll eventually get there. I mean, I think having an end date is important, because if we don't, and I mean, 3 years is plenty of time to get it done. I mean, it's not like, Ms. Craybill saying by next week we'll have this in place. That may not be doable. In 3 years, we should be able to do it. So, I mean, that's my point. And Dr. Faust, I understand what you're saying. We need to get the word out. Well, we have 3 years to do that. I mean, hopefully we're along a lot further than we were back in 1986. But from what I'm hearing from some of the folks, and like I say, if we are going to have a huge push, physical education is a different entity than is a health classroom. And like I said, I could tell you horror stories. I'm not going to do that now and here, but I could tell you some horror stories of kids sitting on air conditioning units because we had no chairs for them, because we had 55 kids in the class that were meant for 30 kids. So and I know we're a lot further down the road on this and that, but I mean, I think that if we don't have an end date, then we're going to just continue.
I agree with an end date. I just don't see that as policy language.
Well, like I said before, is that this is a unique policy that is requiring us to really look at it every single year and determine if our goals are the same or different. So, Julie, maybe you want to weigh in a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. This policy does require an annual revisit to the board of the accomplishments of the goals. And so, and then to determine if the goals are still current and relevant to the board. So this one is very different, that it's not a policy that you kind of put in place and it stays in place. It's one that has to be, like Ms. Craybill said, it has to be revisited annually. And I don't see that part, but I think it's like by September or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's beginning of year revisiting. So again, whatever works. I understand what Dr. Faust is saying with a term of measure in policy, because those are generally not aligned. And I think it would make really good sense for this to have a specific term of measure in the strategic plan, which I think is going to be more of that living, breathing document that we refer to and we are working toward, and knowing that the commitment is in policy, but the term of measure being in the strategic plan, I think would make sense too. Just my opinion.
When you look at the one of the challenges is that the class size law mandates class sizes from K3, but for 12, there's what's called no limit. And so the language I found sort of in statute says that there should be a teacher to student ratio comparable to other curriculum areas.
Yeah.
Would be the language that is sort of touted around.
Right.
The challenge, of course, being there is no limit requirement. Now, this at its core really is a conversation with high school principals about schedule and how to schedule and how to balance your schedule so that it meets. We had always a couple of classes that had a different, like, so 29 was my limit in a core class. CT had 20 and 16, I think, or 20 and 18 for the level of the class. And PE, I think I capped mine about 35 was my limit. So I think we should work internally on a procedure that gets to the policy. I don't think we should put a number in here, but the language comparable to other curricular areas was the language that's used.
I could go with that too, Chris. If you could you send those words to Kim, if the rest of us are in agreement with that, because those actually are more specific than work to align.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And again, I'm going to have to just come back to the fact that this has been a concern from the teacher standpoint for 30 years plus. And I mean, just to keep it so ambiguous that we're saying we hope to align to it. I think at least the word must needs to, and I hate to get into the must or shall, but I mean, we need to have something in there so that it happens. I mean, I hate to say it, it's been been talked about, it's been worked on for 35 years, and we haven't gotten there yet. And like I say, my biggest thing is in physical education, you probably can get by with 40 kids or 45 kids in a classroom. The concern being is if we're going to truly push, which I think is a good thing, that we're going 50-50 with health. I'll be honest, I think we need to think about those teachers that, may have 45 kids. And I hate to say it, I guarantee that there's a classroom in New Hanover County that has 45 kids in a physical education classroom. And, and like the middle school level, where that same teacher is taking those students into a classroom with 45 kids trying to manage oftentimes. And that's the other thing we're not thinking about in this policy at this point is the fact that, physical education, or in this case, health, is being, they have a cart, they push their cart down in the classroom. They're using somebody else's classroom because they don't have their own space. I mean, I think we're putting a whole bunch of hurdles in front of, good word for physical education, a whole bunch of hurdles in front of a teacher. If we could keep the class level down to if we could truly do this, which I think is an important thing that we do, especially in the health realm, I think that's a big piece. And the other piece, as we talk about socio emotional, I know that a lot of times we have, that physical education health teacher is that a lot of the kids' closest person that they can go talk to. You have to have that one adult in the class or in school that you can go talk to. A lot of times it's coach so-and-so or coach so-and-so, and when you get 45 kids in the classroom, that's hard for that person to do at the middle school level or high school level. So anyway, I think there's a lot of pieces, a lot of factors in here. I don't want to get on a soapbox about this, but I mean, I'll agree with what we've said, as long as we truly get to the point, like I say, it's been way too long in coming. So I guess I'll be quiet now, because otherwise we'll talk about this until 11 o'clock. So.
Okay. I have one other comment we spent a lot of time the first go round on this policy. So I think that all the things we added are really good. One thing that I did want to bring up, and again, it's in paragraph 1-2 of the school health advisory, where it lists the membership that has to be in there. So right now the school health advisory meets after school at 4:00. It has been through Zoom, but it also has been in person. It says that we are required to have a student on that team. So I think it's okay to keep it down there, but that would be something that I would assume would be something that would be more procedural on how we identify that student and allow them to participate. Do we have to even talk about that, or is that just something that would come through your department, Julie? Okay.
All right. Did anybody have anything else on this policy? I know we have spent quite a bit of time on it over the last couple of months.
Actually, I do have. Okay, I just have one more quick thing.
I do too.
Go ahead, you go first.
Yes, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead. You go first.
Okay, my question is with the 50-50, so let's say in a high school where there are, what is it, how many days are in the semester, 80 days. So we're saying 40 days of PE, 40 days of, and I'm just being hypothetical, throwing that out there, 40 days of PE, 40 days of health.
That's what I think it's saying. Yeah.
Yes, I think that might, I don't know if Dr. Smith is on and she can speak from history on this, but given the curriculum requirements, and again, I'm not trying to speak instruction, but can talk about it. Given the curriculum requirements and the prevention programs, the core programs that we have included as a part of our health and PE partnership, yes, that would be the recommendation.
So then my question would be, if there are high school, I'll say there are 4 coaches, I'm assuming there'd have to be 2 and 2, because where will we find this? I mean, I'm not a principal, I don't know the buildings, so, and not pushing back, but I'm just thinking, we have to find space for them to be in a classroom at that time to make sure it's what Mr. Wildebohr was saying. So now, have we shown this to our health and PE folks, the lead? They've seen it and commented on it in the curriculum,
Yes,
and we have a viable curriculum to support it. I just don't want to set people up for failure.
So the lead for health and PE is the wellness champ for the district and was a part of creating these goals on the school health advisory. Yes, over some time and analysis of results of class sizes and outcomes.
Okay, and the reason why I say all of that is once it's voted on, it goes into play, and then we have to hold them accountable. So when we start to get hate mail, we just have to understand where it's coming from.
And like I say, Dr. Faust, number one, I do applaud you and thank you for that comment, because I think that's very important. But also, and I hate to say it, I spent most of, I don't know how to say it, but I spent a good portion of my career at the middle school level. And, whereas high schools, I think, often have dedicated rooms for, for health, at least they have some, that kind of thing. Like I say, I just remember my days where, I was on a cart trying to get down into a classroom, and that kind of thing, where, so a lot of times at the middle school level, they just don't have the space to be able to do. So when they push in for help, it's somebody's classroom, and, you're trying to do your best and not mess up their classroom. So, I mean, that's one of my big things with having that number of kids in there. And, unfortunately, sometimes, if you have a crowded classroom like most middle schools do, by the time that, the health teacher gets in there, the class is already there. And I know that's just, individual school things and principals having to work things out. But I mean, as you just said, I mean, that's my biggest thing is I don't want to set anyone up for failure. And so I think it is very important to look at that. And I mean, I would, applaud having, the lead health and physical education teachers, but I mean, even sending out something out to all the individual schools to let each individual school respond. So we get a good idea of, let's see what will work, what won't work. And, look at, have we looked at class sizes throughout the county? Are we there? Are we, where are we in that whole realm? If we need to look at this, yearly, or, how many classes are at, where we want to be, and how many of them are, well above that?
So, I'm sorry, guys, I have to jump off real quick. So, I appreciate the discussion. I know you guys will finish strong. But I hope everybody has a good day and enjoy the banquet today. Thank you guys for all your hard work.
Thank you, Nelson.
Okay, so Pete, I did want to just jump in. So the policy 8720 has been in play for quite some time, where a wellness coordinator was identified and wellness champs at each school have been identified, and they have been meeting every other month for about, Julie, 4 years, maybe more. So they have addressed this issue over and over. Every school is identified. Every school puts plans in their school improvement plans. Wellness is part of that, which we got a chance to see when we reviewed all of the school improvement plans back in October. So this is not something that is just being pulled out of the air that we think this is good. It's something that the wellness coordinators at each school have been working on. And the wellness coordinator is not necessarily the PE teacher, but the PE teachers are all parts of their wellness teams at their school. So there has been a lot of dialogue and a lot of discussion and a lot of changes over the past 4 years, or maybe even 5.
But my question was, so have we looked, do we have a chart anywhere? Do we have the numbers out where, at such and such middle school, we have 32 kids and the average class size? Do we have that at the high school level? Do we have those numbers that we can look at?
Joelle Newman probably does, or Sherry Pinto, because that fits right into her purview, as graduation coach, or I forget what her title is. Julie, you jump in. This is your area.
Yeah. So Sherry Pinto does have that. That was an early discussion when the policy first was discussed here in policy committee. And I assigned for Sherry and for Sherry, because Joelle was in curriculum instruction. I assigned for Sherry to work along with the SHAC partners in making sure that we collected that data, so we understood kind of what was our average, but also what were on the other sides of either small health and PE or large health and PE classes. So that data has already been collected.
Okay, and so what are our highest numbers in the county?
So I don't have it pulled up right yet. Hold on.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, I know we did it, but I don't have it right here. So hold tight.
So that's not really part of the policy discussion. That's part of what we would use to support our enforcement of the policy and goal writing for strategic plans. So we don't really have to get down at that level to get this policy forward.
But we won't be able to do the policy if and I'll just be honest with you, if there are 60 kids in a class, you can't do this. That's why I was like, I'm not physically pushing back, but it's like, I don't know if we can, you're setting yourself up, because they've got to move kids around in a schedule in order to make that happen. That's why I was asking about, do we have health rooms? Because once the board votes on it and they say 50-50, and if the teachers do not have or understand the curriculum, I don't know. And I get it they should, but I don't know where this falls. And yeah, so I don't know how many kids are in a class right now. It's outside of the window of the policy, but because we are creating a policy that then influences what the school schedule looks like, I think we do have to look at it.
Thank you.
Since we're in the middle of the semester right now, is it possible to say beginning in the 2022-23 school year? Because now is the time that high schools are building their schedules for next year. Could you put that in the policy with that rider, Dr. Faust, to address his concern?
And it could possibly, if they have the numbers, it may be just as, okay, on, X amount of days, you're going to do PE, if the numbers are there. But if those numbers aren't there, we'll have to have an emergency principals meeting to make them aware of the policy. And then they'll have to get with PE folks. I just don't know. That's me just thinking out loud, how we implement. That's below the policy committee.
Well, I would definitely support not starting it until next school year, because it's really not fair to teachers right now midstream and principals midstream to try and manage that, if they're not already able to manage it.
And Julie may have something different. She'll have the numbers.
Yeah, and as far as the policy is concerned, and I might be misunderstanding, but as far as the policy is concerned, this is really talking about moving toward with a clear timeline to making sure that our health and PE classes are not overcrowded to the point that the instructional outcomes can't be met. And not using it as kind of a scheduling I don't,
Oh.
like magnet where, oops, we don't have, let's put them over here. But as far as the 50-50, that is, in my understanding, is not a part of this policy conversation. That's a part of what health and PE through curriculum instruction has been moving toward. So I think that's just that was brought up as a part of the discussion on, why the class sizes really need to be managed in this way. But that's something that's more strategically being done in curriculum and instruction. And I wish, I'm not trying to be a curriculum instruction voice strategically, but I do know that that's been a part of that discussion. So my point is, I'm not sure this creates any immediate angst. I think this gives a timeline, but I'm also really comfortable with the timeline being a part of strategic plan and having the commitment be in policy without the timeline. I think that makes really good sense. What you said, Dr. Faust.
Okay, so should we just go ahead and move it forward for first reading as written?
I so move.
Okay, so I'll second it, and we'll just but I think we need to put it under the policies for first reading with changes, because we're going to have to insert the goals that weren't inserted, in the document that's posted, and then we have to take out the italics, and we have to take out the header.
Ms. Craybill.
Yes. Oh, Colin, yay.
Sorry. Now, just to make sure I'm clear. So from the version that you sent me this morning, is the only change the revised language that Chris is going to send to Kim under paragraph 1 that's seen here on the screen? That's
what I'm hearing. Yes. Oh, and then to take out the header, and then to take out the italics where it says list anything. Yes.
Okay.
And just one further point on this.
And we're also taking out over 3 years. We're just gonna put work to align.
No, that's not what I agreed to. I think we need to leave the 3 years in there. So,
well,
also
we
had a question
forward, and then the whole board will have to discuss it then, because Nelson's not here to break the tie.
Okay, so then we're going to leave it as it is, correct?
I guess so.
Okay.
Except for the wording that Dr. Barnes is going to add in about how to say it better.
Okay. And I just had a question, and it's got nothing to do with changing policy or anything like that. But in my trips to some of the schools, we are having some difficulties. I think in that's what I was looking for before is section E under number 1 F. The time students spend in waiting for needs to be I can't speak today. Minimized. Thank you. There we go. Not that we want to change that, because that makes a lot of sense to me. That's perfect. But how are we doing? Because I know a lot of the schools were understaffed and we're having some trouble there, and people being out and all. Any idea how that's going throughout the county?
Well, here's my thoughts on that, is that this meeting is not to address what we've written, because if we agree we want to reduce the time, then the superintendent and his staff have to put procedures in place. It's not really a policy.
Okay. All right. I just didn't know if we had any overall, it's going a lot better or not. Okay. All right. Not a problem.
All right. So does anybody have anything else so that we can move off of this one? Okay. So the next one, where's on the agenda? So the next one, I guess, is we move to the policy that we added for let's do communicable diseases next, and then we'll go to the ones that we added at the beginning of the meeting. So the communicable diseases policy 7262. The only question I had on that one is, does COVID fall into this, communicable diseases? And so is everything in here, appropriate for our COVID? Because the one line that I thought that really made it appropriate was in section C2, the last sentence of the first paragraph. Any employee suffering from a communicable disease or condition is required to follow all control measures given to him or her by the health director. Is the health director the New Hanover County and the North Carolina? Is that what that means?
I think we looked at this last time and we made sure that we were following the COVID guidelines for that.
Okay,
Julie, do you remember?
Yeah, this fully aligns with COVID protocol, because COVID protocol that's been developed already aligns with communicable disease statute and policy. And when it says health director, it does mean local health director, because those are the ones by statute that can issue a quarantine or isolation.
Should we then write in there local government health director, so it doesn't imply that we have a health director in our school system, or does that matter?
Alan, do you want to weigh in? Because it's based on statute, and that's the health director.
Yeah, is that, it might be defined somewhere where, does it define health director anywhere in policy?
Well, up on in the first paragraph, first sentence of that same paragraph, it says employees shall follow all measures to control the spread of communicable disease as directed by the state and local health department.
The local health department is the county health department.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it says local health department in the first sentence, we're assuming that health director is from the local health department in the last sentence.
That's correct.
Okay.
Can we confirm that that we're citing General Statute 130A-145, because that is the general statute that outlines the definition of the state health director and the local health director, and it says they're empowered to exercise quarantine and isolation. So that's the general statute on that.
Kim, can you scroll down to the references at the bottom?
Yeah, 130A.
130A.
Okay. So this one then is good to move on for first reading as it's presented.
So moved.
Okay, we'll move it along. Great. Next up is policy 2330, meeting agenda. We talked about this at our last policy committee meeting, and one clause did not get put in. And I guess we had so many different things happening at the time. I proposed adding at the last policy committee, went back and read. It's in the opening paragraph, right after presented. To say the board chair. Kim, do you have my notes on what I sent you? It says in rough that the board chair has the authority to recess or adjourn the meeting that runs over 4.5 hours and table remaining items to a subsequent meeting. Yep, there it is. The top one. No, it's the right. Yeah, 2330. It's the third one. The board chair reserves the right to recess or adjourn any board meeting that lasts longer than 4.5 hours and to table any remaining items to a subsequent meeting. Do you have any comment on that? Because I think it's really based. I mean, I think everybody in the room who's on this call wants the meetings to be over in way less than 4.5 hours. But we did talk about that specific number at our last policy committee meeting, and I just wanted it to get added in.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Just to clarify, is that including the work session, or is that just the full meeting itself?
If we include a work session, then that's part of the full meeting. So if we're having a work session, then yeah, that just adds time.
Okay.
Can I make one suggestion? Is that instead of the word table, we say postpone.
Okay.
Since, table normally refers to a motion that's already been made.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
I am too.
Postpone. Okay. All right. So then we will move that one forward with the changes. And that actually doesn't have to be for first reading. That one goes under the existing policies for amendment. And then we'll just change that wording to table. I mean, to postpone.
Postpone.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So the next one that we talked about, Kim, if you could put up the notes that I had there before. So let's do policy 2300 board meetings. Mr. Wildeboer had brought this up as part of policy, or as part of our discussion at our last board meeting. So I thought that policy 2300 board meetings was the more appropriate place to put it instead of policy 2310 public participation in board meetings. So to capture the essence of what he said, I am suggesting that let me get rid of all your faces so I can read it appropriately. Oops, no, now all I see is Chris Barnes. Sorry. That you're the only head that comes up. Okay. The Board of Education shall hold no less than 3 meetings annually with the sole intent of enhancing listening and dialogue opportunities with the public. These meetings shall last approximately, but no longer than 2 hours. The public format may vary at the discretion of the board chair to include such formats as town halls, roundtable discussions, call to the audience, etc. Mr. Wildeboer had originally said that he wanted to have a 2-hour call to the audience, but a call, and just to remind that a call to the audience is just where we sit and listen. We don't have dialogue. So I wanted to put that as just one type of format that we can consider, so that we could consider actually talking to people, either in a town hall setting, which is kind of like a call to the audience, or in a roundtable discussion where, folks can talk to, can move to different parts of the room or different tables for discussion. So Pete, does that meet your intent?
Yeah, no, and I was gonna say, if you remember, actually, I said, we'd start with the call of the audience and we try, hopefully move to a different format, like the roundtable discussion, or I think I actually talked about, the town hall. So, to hopefully move to, to start with the one and move to the other. So, I mean, I think this captures it. So that's great.
Okay.
The only thing is, there is some ambiguity here, and I'm fine with that, but I just don't want to, again, say, well, okay, we'll do, October, November, and December or something. I'd like to see if we can maybe say that we'll space them out, throughout the year, so that we, hear from people. We don't just kind of clump them all at the end of the year or something. And I don't think we would do that, but anyway.
And I was talking with Josh. If Josh is on the call, he can jump in too for advice. And what we kicked around was if we're real specific about the month, then maybe we might miss an opportunity, for a town hall, like a hot button kind of item comes up, and we wanted to, have a town hall about that. So if we say 3 meetings, that really generally implies quarterly. If we want to say quarterly, then I guess I'm okay with that as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great if we could. That way, we do that. That'll space it out. So quarterly would be great. It'd be great. One word will make a big improvement, I think.
So we'll say at least quarterly.
Okay, sounds good.
No less than 3.
That sounds perfect.
All right, it's kind of saying the same thing. Okay, so that one. I'm sorry, Colin, you want to jump in? Yeah,
just so my only thought is just on the wording a little bit. So a public forum is a specialized term in First Amendment law that basically would mean the board has opened a space as a free speech zone where somebody can say whatever they want to say. I don't know if that's necessarily the intent. If we want to have it, for instance, we might want to have a meeting just about one topic, right?
Right.
Instead of calling it a public forum, could we call it a public participation meeting or something like that? Idea.
That sounds good to me.
So Colin, I had proposed in section B3 adding E, public forum. Do we want to keep that under the public hearing letter, which is letter D, and then just have this be another type of to include it in there? What do you think?
Well, public hearing can also have kind of a specialized definition in the law. That's why I was, if we
Okay.
just called it, B3E, public participation meetings.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Pete, you good with that?
I'm good with that.
And then
Okay.
in the second, in the last sentence there, it would say the public participation format.
The public. Okay. Yeah. Instead of public forum. Okay. All right. I'll follow up with Kim because that's not a hard change to add in. Okay. All righty. Thank you. And then so the last policy that Ms. Walker, Kim, if you pull up the policy 7310 8225. Ms. Walker had some concerns at our last meeting that some words were taken out and she wanted them back in a different way. And so I thought we could just discuss it there. Okay. So the wording that but I think it makes more sense to put it in, to show the policy on where it fits in. Wasn't there, did I send an attachment? Okay, so if you scroll down, the easiest way to find it, it's all highlighted in yellow. There you go. All right, so she was concerned that we took away board prerogative to cancel, to have final authority on crowdfunding, and to have board authority to not even to hold a hearing if we wanted to. So the wording that she wrote was, Kim, where did you? Can we show that screen again so we can see the wording? Hold this one because we're going to come back to it. I don't think it's this email. think I put it in this one right above the yellow. Okay, number 3, review. She wanted to add back in number 3, review by the school board. The board reserves the right to make any final decisions regarding crowdfunding campaigns and retains the right to review any appeals or denials. Because she was concerned that we struck out the whole board responsibility there. And the conversation that I recall when we had that meeting was that this really wasn't necessary. This really wasn't a board level kind of decision. So if Mary Hazel wants to jump in, or Dr. Faust or Colin, anyone who else has any recollection of this. And I did not go back and rewatch the policy meeting to hear, but I don't recall this having a concern about removing the board's responsibility. Nobody has a comment? So do we want to leave it as presented, or do we want to add that in? Pete, what are your thoughts?
I think we should, I have no problem adding it back in. I understand what Ms. Walker's, talking about. I understand it's not necessarily at our level, but that way there we are sure to be apprised of what's going on.
So if I'm reading this correctly, if a school wants to do a crowdfunding, it's approved by the superintendent, the superintendent wants to do one within his purview of rights, we can just say no, we're not going to agree to it. Is that what you're wanting?
Well, like I say, I think maybe we should just bring it up to the whole board. And I mean, that's what I heard the other day, was I think that there were several members of the board that did want to have that opportunity to at least weigh in. I would have no problem in doing something just like a report or just a communication of what's going on. I mean, I don't want to strip the superintendent of the right to be able to make the final call on it, because it is something that we don't necessarily need to be a part of. But on the other hand, if it goes awry, it's not something that we don't want to know about.
Is Nancy Braswell on this call by chance? I don't see. All right. I personally don't see the need to put it back in, because we already discussed it. But if we can put it in, and then somebody can bring it back up. That's just what she did at the last board meeting, and we were told to take it to policy. So we basically just put this in here for another discussion. So we will, I guess we'll just leave this in, since it's a one-to-one. We'll just leave this in, and then when we bring it back for an amendment, then the board will have a chance to weigh in between now and then. Unless anybody has anything else.
That sounds good.
All right. Then let's just put that on the existing policies for amendment and to move it through. Okay, so next up on our agenda would be policy 1610 7800. That was, I don't know if we want to do that in the mix of numerical order, or this one came to us up front. So Dr. Barnes, did we want to do this one first? It's the one on professional and staff development, 1610/7800.
I'm looking in the policy updates. Hang on. We prepared starting with workday and overtime. So I don't remember why we pulled professional and staff development off from the last meeting.
Yeah, I don't either. That's why I thought it was interesting. But we did add some more. I think you added a mental health training component. It's in the letter A, 1, 2, 3, third paragraph. where you talked about specific mental health training and the other statutes that we had to cover for child abuse and related threats to child safety and student health services.
Yeah, we were fine with this one. We're fine for it to go forward.
Okay. I didn't have any comments on that one because the McKenna's notes were that we'd already adopted that. We just put in a couple updates and I see the red updates.
Yep, we can move it on up.
Okay. So that one is just ready. That we'll show that one as an amendment one. So it doesn't have to go through first reading. Okay. So now we're on to finally the 7,000 series. So the first one up is 7,500 workday and overtime.
All right, you'll see some of the additions that the state board made. We have a couple of additional changes. If you go down to C, overtime and compensatory time, we took out the word documented and turned in signed and used the word documented. If you look at the bottom of the page, go up. There you go. Last sentence, accurate and complete timesheets of actual hours worked during the work week must be documented by every employee. We don't do paper timesheets anymore, so signed really isn't the appropriate word. Documented would be.
Okay. I had a question about the last sentence of letter C for that first paragraph. It starts at the bottom of the page and continues on. It sounds a little run on to me, and the sentence actually ends. Yeah, so read through that sentence because we got that and in there right before submitted, and it just sounds like we missed something or we cut and pasted and forgot to take it out.
I think the sentence is supposed to read rotating schedule to ensure leave in time reported match the timesheets and to make an assessment of overtime use.
Okay.
So basically, there's a process for checking to make sure that overtime is kept in check.
Okay. So in the second paragraph of letter C, it only talks about overtime compensation for in lieu of overtime compensation for non-exempt employees. We don't talk about exempt employees because we talk about them in a later policy?
Well, exempt employees can't receive overtime because they're exempt.
Salaries.
No, I was looking at comp time because it says
They don't get comp time either.
okay.
The Fair Labor Standards Act law breaks you into two categories. You're either exempt or non-exempt. If you're non-exempt, you have to record hourly by hour. If you're exempt, it's all off the table.
Okay, so that let's say that you like a teacher, comes to work regularly and then stays after work for after normal work hours for PTA meetings or open houses. That's just part of the day that they just work.
Because they're salaried, you actually can't, by law, give them comp time.
Pardon me?
You can't give them comp time because they're exempt.
Because of that, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's a sticky widget a little bit because if a teacher was accruing comp time and then their contract ended or they left, they can't claim those hours as worked because they're exempt. The Fair Labor Standards Act really makes a real break in that. So.
Okay.
We did have a change though in that paragraph. If you look to see where the red line is, it says last day of the school year. We wanted to say fiscal year because it actually ends June 30, not when the school year itself ends.
So where should we write that?
Change the word school to fiscal.
In the
right there where the cursor was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at my paper, not the cursor. Okay.
Last day of the fiscal year.
Okay.
For employees. Or actually, we just said last day of the fiscal year, period.
Okay.
Because that applies to everybody, not school-based, non-school-based.
Okay. All right. So that one we'll stick over there.
Those were all of our changes in regards to this.
So I had a question for you on in E where it says employee volunteers. How can an employee be a volunteer if we're paying them a stipend to coach? In like that was stated in the last sentence. Classified
Thanks,
employees may volunteer.
Ms. Graybill. So if the stipend is on under a certain amount, it's considered just a nominal fee, and it doesn't actually qualify as compensation, and so they can still be a volunteer and receive a nominal fee.
Gotcha. And does that also apply to club advisors?
It would apply to any volunteer role that receives a stipend, as long as the stipend is low enough that it would amount to that it is nominal, according to the Department of Labor.
Should we say nominal, or is it just implied?
I'm looking at the language. It wouldn't hurt to add nominal there.
Okay. Okay. And then so can we also add in coaching services or club advisor services, because so that folks understand that that is in the same category? Athletics sometimes gets a bad rap because they get things that or perceived get things that and benefits that other people who are doing the same kind of things that are just not athletic. Can we add that in?
I certainly don't care. Colin, do you have a thought on that?
I was making that last change. I apologize, Ms. Graybill. What was the next?
No, where it says classified employees may volunteer to provide coaching services, or club advisor services, because a lot of club advisors get a nominal stipend also to do that. I just don't want people to think that like academic related or other, extracurricular activities aren't as important as sports.
Yeah, the policy is trying to avoid it. So that sentence relates back to the sentence before that. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, you can't have a classified, a teacher assistant cannot volunteer to supervise students after school, because those duties are the same. That's what they do as a TA, right? And
yes.
So this policy is trying to say what things you could do that wouldn't violate the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? And so I don't know, in a particular situation, then they may not be able to serve as a supervisor for a student group if that's closely aligned to what their duties are as a classified employee. We might not let them. They might not be able to volunteer to do that.
It's why a bus driver can't drive a bus for a coaching event and do that
Right.
differently, because that's contained in their job description. So if supervising students is part of a TA's job, she may not be able to supervise after school for a nominal fee that may need to be hour for hour.
Okay, I'm thinking of, let's say, like a science Olympiad or the chess club, or an art club that a TA or a teacher would not necessarily be the art teacher having this performance club or art club or chess club. So how do those kind of roles fit in where they're not really doing the same job?
That's hard because our job description, especially for teacher, is sort of broad, and supervising students is contained in almost all of our job descriptions, and that sort of carries over to anything else. Now, teachers
we're not saying that, Ms. Graybill, we're not saying that folks can't do those things. We're just saying that legally we can't consider them volunteers for those activities, if that makes sense.
But they're still going to get their stipend.
Yeah, they still may get a stipend, but
Right.
That's separate.
Okay. I think I'm just confusing myself. I just don't want to make sure. I just want to make sure that that our club advisors are valued, as just as much as our coaching staffs are valued. And so that's why I had never heard of them called volunteers before. So because they got paid, but I understand that now. So I'm good with that.
Okay. We were fine with everything else in this one.
Okay. All right. So Colin, does this one count as just moving on to first reading with no corrections?
If I had the one minor change,
But you added the fiscal year.
we've got the fiscal year change and then nominal before stipend.
Okay. Does that
And
count
that's
as a change, or is it, or just a move forward?
I mean, if we're normal, how are we normally moving forward with policies that have just minor revisions?
The minor ones that you're doing right there, we normally just move forward for first reading. It's the ones where we have to like change a whole sentence,
Okay.
that kind of stuff that we keep on with changes to make sure that you get the whole sentence right.
Got it. Well, I think we can just move forward as we normally would then with just a minor technical change.
Okay. All right. All right. Anybody else got anything on 7,500? Okay, let's move to 7503 teleworking. Dr. Barnes?
Now, we spent a lot of time with this, and we didn't make any substantive changes. I went back and reviewed the teleworking policy I had in my last district. COVID stuff and emergency stuff, and when we close the school system down, are all contained in section B. But one question I want to bring up, and I thought we need to process and talk about a little bit, is letter C, which is called basically episodic teleworking arrangements. We don't have this in policy currently, obviously, because the last time we did policy, this wasn't really as much of a thing as it is now. I think we want to be sure that we understand that we're opening a door, or at least creating a door for this. And we would have to build procedures for this, and we would have to build, there's a lot that the HR department would build if this policy came to fruition. But this letter C does open the door for us to create a teleworking situation based on specific need. So the example we used here was, I am expecting a child and my doctor has put me on homebound, but I can still complete my duties. The baby hasn't come yet, all those sorts of things. So we would create sort of a mini episodic teleworking arrangement with that person. I am going through cancer treatments, and my doctor doesn't feel comfortable with me coming into the office, but I can still do my job. So this would create an opportunity for us to create these situations as needed. There are some time frames in it, no more than 20 work days for an episode, or no more than 40 over the course of a 12-month period. I just want to make sure the board is aware that this would create a situation where some people would then ask for that. And we would build procedures and a process for approving those. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware what that reads and says.
On a case-by-case basis, is that why it says episodic and non-precedential, that kind of thing?
So this would not be a teleworking policy. And in my last district, half of our technology people didn't come to the office. The people doing like technology-based stuff all the time on computers, they had a permanent teleworking sort of arrangement. This would not mean that I could say to my HR staff, on Fridays, everybody works remotely. It stops that happening. It's really specific episodic, but we would have to build procedures and sort of I don't want to say a rubric, but some way for us to assess and judge each one of those.
Okay.
Could I ask Dr. Faust for his opinion on that section, please? Dr. Faust, what's your opinion on that whole section?
Sorry, I'm having some technology issues.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need to probably discuss that a little farther to make sure that we're really clear on this one. I'll stop there. I think I do believe that, we granted some teleworking for individuals during COVID. And there were teachers and, employees who work from home, but we would definitely need to have conversations. So, to see how this actually works, I think we need to possibly table this one and come back.
And that's what I was going to say. So maybe it might make sense to me to go ahead and table this one. We'll talk about, give everybody a month to kind of work through it, and then we can, bring it back up for next month. Are you okay with that, Ms. Craybill?
Ms. Crable, you're muted.
Ms. Craybill, you okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I was on mute. I have a couple questions about that. So if I have those, should I just forward those questions to Dr. Barnes directly, or send them to Dr. Faust and then he sends them to Dr. Barnes?
And I think the devil's in the details in this. I think this is becoming a normal policy in a lot of companies,
Right.
a lot of businesses. I know for me, if I had to lose a supervisor, a hiring manager for 20 days or have them work remotely, there's benefits and cost analysis on both sides. So I think this takes a deeper dive. I think A and B and D are fine. I think C is really the rub of how we want to work that.
Okay. Yeah, because in letter D, for example, when you say when number 1 says employees are prohibited from teleworking when they are identified as personnel whose physical presence at their regularly assigned place of work is essential. So I'm thinking of perhaps, one of our NCVPS teachers, that they don't teach anybody in a classroom. So they could possibly telework. And that's just like as an example.
This is really speaking also to the fact that you can't request episodic or periodic leave if your job doesn't allow for it. Custodian, bus driver.
Right.
There are some jobs where their physical presence is required. And I think that's what that's getting at is that there is, just a common sense sort of issue here where if your job just can't be done remotely, it just can't be done remotely.
Right. Okay.
Colin, since we're tabling this, I guess it doesn't matter, but under the last sentence in number 1 under D, but the apostrophe on workers needs to be after the S, not between. Sorry. I've got a couple of English majors in this department.
Yeah, well, and now that you said that, I had a couple of those kind of things in the crowdfunding. That is it appropriate for me just to reach out to Colin and have him fix those like commas? There's no space because we had too many markups and we didn't realize we've left out spaces. Is that the way to handle that, Colin?
That works.
Okay. All right. I'll do that separately so we don't take up anybody's time.
So
we're going to go ahead and put 7503 in the category of policies held in committee. Okay. Next up, we have compliance with State Board of Education employment policies, 7505.
We are fine.
I was
I had
fine.
nothing on this. I had nothing on this.
Okay, yay.
Whenever it says compliance with State Board, I'm like, we're good with that.
We're good with it. We have to do it whether we like it or not. We figure it out.
7505 moves on up.
All right, so next is policy 7510.
All right, so
Oh, that's leave.
yes, ma'am. We had something on number E, letter E, excuse me, Mr. Wildebohr, letter E. Under vacation leave, I don't necessarily think this needs to be in policy, but I think it needs to be clear, and it's in our personnel handbook, that sick leave is not to be used for vacation time. That you can't be sick at Disney World, so to speak. And I think that's
Good.
well, you could, but
Yeah, we really stink.
this is an issue I think we're going to address in our personnel handbook, but periodically you will see people who will be going on vacation and access sick leave for that. And that is actually against, there's several things wrong with that, but so we don't think it needs to be in policy, but I think we want to make sure that it's something that we're aware of, that that's not a use for that.
Okay. I had a question in that same category, Dr. Barnes, in the last paragraph where it says during non-academic year. So does non-academic year, does that mean like summer for the traditional schools and intersession for the year-round schools?
It also means like spring break, fall break, winter break. Those
Okay.
are non-academic periods.
Okay. All right.
The next, if you could look at number G and Colin.
Number G?
Did I do it again?
Yes,
Letter
you did.
You look at letter G. Colin, I don't know if this is a state requirement. We want to strike this whole thing out.
Yeah, I was wondering about that myself.
I believe it is a state requirement.
Especially since charter schools and like a regional school would be CTEC, and then DC Virgo, you know, they're public schools.
And we knew that DC Virgo has a different sort of spin on it because of the way that the contract's written, but it seems a little bit like we're funding the competition.
Yeah, I know it. It is. It's a strange law. I think measure the General Assembly took. Let me see if I can pull it up very quickly.
Because is this I remember when DC Virgo was starting up, we allowed public, you know, it was a public school, and we allowed the teachers that wanted to work at DC Virgo, you know, stay there as a lab school instead of a New Hanover County school. We did allow them the 1 year to change their mind and not lose their seniority within the public school. So that maybe that's what this was all about.
I'm sure it is. It just we just didn't like the way it reads. And Colin,
Yeah,
if it has to be there, it has to be there. But we're not a fan.
Give me just one moment.
Well, and while we're doing that, can I ask a quick question? I just wanted to double check and get a little bit more clarification on letter A, minimum leave time. So is that typically in a situation where somebody is leaving to go to state or a doctor's appointment? Is that why it's in hours and not like half days or something? Am I muted? Yeah. No.
I think the state adopted that approach versus it used to probably be half day, whole day.
Yeah.
So like you said, so some appointments or some things they may just need, you know, an hour off versus taking on full day. So I think the state went to that minimal leave time.
Okay, that makes sense. That's what I figured, but I just want to make sure.
That's awesome. Other counties around us are not doing that. They're making people take, like a Pender County in specific, they are making people take a half day or a whole day for 10 minutes, you know, leave their class early and with somebody to cover for them. Okay, so is Colin still looking?
Yeah, I'm still working on it. We can just hold on that for a moment.
Okay. So I had a question, and I have it written next to letter A. Okay, so the heading where it says temporary requirement related to COVID-19.
Yes.
That's its own separate standalone paragraph. I don't have a problem with that at all. But does letter A, B, and all the others?
I think it goes with the whole policy.
Yeah. And so is there a way that we can write that better? Because to me, when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking when I first started reading it, I'm like, oh, wow, look at all these requirements under the temporary requirements for COVID. So maybe because you called it out with a bold that it did that. So I was just wondering, is there a way to make that more clear that all the letters that follow that paragraph are standalone on their own?
Maybe we should put another header, above A and just have a title for that whole section.
Or I was thinking taking temporary requirement related to COVID-19 and put it at the end,
That'll work.
all the letters.
Oh, make it its own letter.
Or I was just
Yeah.
thinking put it as a paragraph at the end.
Maybe it can be like number J.
Wow, I'm shade getting thrown at the HR person here.
We love you, HR. Okay.
I'm doing it.
That's how we're doing it now, huh? Number J. Okay.
Actually, we did have a couple of other notes before we.
Yeah, no, but we're ready. I mean, we're just killing time while Colin's looking. So go ahead.
But I agree with you that it does seem like all those A through H sort of reference COVID instead of the policy in general. Occasionally comp time. All right. If you look under letter H, discretionary leave or absence without pay, this is sort of a catch-all for someone who isn't eligible for FMLA, they're out of sick time, but they're still they're needing something. They're either too ill or there's a specific circumstance that comes up. Our general run is that we previously called it the extenuating circumstances, but you have to be employed for 3 years before being eligible to apply for this. So that's
For 3 years.
Yeah, like you have to be employed with us for 3 years before you can have a discretionary absence without pay.
Okay. Is that written in there somewhere?
No, that's why we would.
Yeah.
It's in our procedures. I don't necessarily think it needs to be in policy, but I wanted to make sure you guys were aware that we do have a minimum requirement for you to have been with us for a period of time before you can access that. And this
I
is in
think
no
we
way.
definitely should have that in policy.
Okay, then
Don't
Colin
you,
would
Pete?
want to add that. I'm fine with it. And this is
Yeah, I would agree, because otherwise they're going to, somebody might come back and say, well, your policy doesn't say that. And you can say, well, yeah, but this does. But, but your policy, I could hear someone saying, well, your policy clearly does not say that. So,
and
it'd be better to have it.
and my understanding is this isn't required. It's not required by FMLA. It's not required by Fair Labor Standards Act. This is us trying to help hold on to and maintain a good employee. So I think the 3 years is a reasonable expectation.
I would want to say would typically, because there could be a certain circumstance, particularly if a person has a disability and they're requesting like a very short, say they've exhausted their FMLA and they've had a procedure and they need 4 more days before they can come back, and they're out of sick leave, they're out of FMLA. But if they just have that 4 additional days of unpaid leave, then they can return to work.
I'm fine with that. Or maybe
then we might have an ADA problem if we don't allow that. So I would want to just leave ourselves wiggle room.
you can say typically, or can you say the discretionary thing we always put in stuff, or?
Yeah. I'll try to come up with some language on that one.
Okay.
In the meantime, I was able to find the general statute. It's 115C 218.90 that requires us to give leave for folks to work in charter schools. That was passed by the General Assembly in 2017. So that's a relatively new law.
Nice that we have a level playing field. So then that just needs to go in as it's written.
Right.
Okay.
And that then I wasn't following closely, Colin. Are those in the legal references?
I assume it is, but let me look. It is.
Yeah, there it
Okay.
is.
Okay.
All right. The last thing, and Colin, you can address this or not. In letter H, bona fide religious holiday. I sort of don't want to be the guy who has to say whether your religion is bona fide or not. Is there a list at the state level what constitutes a bona fide religion?
Because like is Scientology a bona fide religion?
So I don't believe so. And I think that is just if it's sincerely held religious belief. And that's something that we normally don't question. Unless we have some type of objective evidence to show that the person doesn't really hold that belief. For instance, they posted on social media that they made up this fake religious beliefs to get a day of vacation. But if it otherwise appears the person sincerely holds that belief, then that's kind of the end of the inquiry for us.
Okay, that sort of felt like a swing at a pitch in the dirt to me a little bit. I didn't want to be the one holding the decision making of whether or not your religion is bona fide or not. But okay, if that's the language that the state uses, I understand that clarification of what constitutes the bona fides, I guess. Okay, those were all of our thoughts on that one. 0 for 4 on that one, it looks like.
That's okay.
Keep swinging. Keep swinging.
Babe Ruth went down swinging a lot of times. All right, so I had a couple comments that I wanted to ask about. So in letter B, the continuous leave for more than 10 days, when I was reading in McKenna's notes, it says that the board may eliminate the 10-day threshold or may increase the number of days. So I was just wondering, wondering about that. Is that something that we should think about, changing that 10-day, or is that just what the state recommends and we should just stick with it? Since McKenna said that we can change that.
Well, for us, the way we do FMLA is we do a rolling 12-month period. And so you have a certain number of days contained in FMLA that you can be out. We wanted to make sure that they're accessing that FMLA if they're going over 10, so they can't just, that it's basically starts the clock. And that's why we want them to have the access to the FMLA after 10 days. It just helps us be more efficient, and it helps us track people who are out for extended periods of time.
Okay. In letter D, the last sentence of the second paragraph, we have to supply a reason for being out. And it says, if the teacher does not provide a reason, the teacher shall receive full salary less the cost of hiring a sub. So talk to me about that a little bit. Like, what's the difference between a reason and a not reason?
That was a new rule put in by the General Assembly when they put out the budget. Initially, personal leave was personal leave.
Right.
And now and what happened is you paid $50 for the sub and you could go for whatever reason. This is the General Assembly tracking the reason for what you're going on leave. Now, the teacher can give any reason at all to the principal, and the principal says that's a valid reason. I'm not super comfortable with that addition in the General Assembly, because I sort of feel like personal leave's purpose was to say to a teacher, periodically, you just have something go on, and that's your business. And this sort of is oversight of that. So I'm not super comfortable with it, but I don't think we have a choice, Colin, do we?
I'm sorry, I was wordsmithing the discretionary leave.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Basically, that the teachers have to give a reason for the personal leave or pay the full cost of the sub. Last paragraph, letter D.
Letter D, in the last two sentences.
But that is new this year.
Yeah, because I was just getting a little agita reading it, thinking that, Principal A says that Stephanie can take personal leave for the reason that, she wants to go watch her kid, participate in an out-of-town sport event.
That's a perfect example.
Principal B says, no, you're not doing that, and denies it. And then I use sick leave because I'm been denied personal leave.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't take it. It just means you have to pay for it.
And Chris,
okay.
you think that's from a new law that was passed?
I believe it came out when they did the budget in January.
As part of the budget bill?
So I think this is where we sort of guide and shape the principal's response to this. And I've already had some conversation with the principals about this, but this was something definitely that came out in January.
Yeah, I see teachers having a little bit of hard time with that I have to pay for my sub, but you don't. Depending, perhaps.
And not to tell tales out of school, but I told the principals this wouldn't be something I would, I would say I'm going skydiving every time. And that just, I don't really, it doesn't say it has to be a good reason. It just says you have to give a reason.
I know that just
It doesn't even say that the principal has to approve the reason. It just says you have to give a reason.
Okay, they don't have to approve it. Well, they have to approve you being
They have
out,
to
right?
approve the leave, and that's just normal policy that if
Right.
you have to give within 5 days and all these things. But it doesn't say that the reason is approved. It just says you either have to give a reason or pay for it. It doesn't even say that the reason has to be true.
Yeah, or even good, right? I guess because your personal leave could be as I don't want to come today.
No, hopefully we're not there, but yeah.
Well, I mean, don't want to. I need to walk my dog today.
Yeah, right. So it doesn't specify that the reason is
Okay.
approved, but it does specify they have to give a reason or pay for the sub.
Okay.
So this is, I apologize, I'm just catching up on this. So this is the result of a back and forth between the General Assembly and the State Board of Education. And it basically, any reason is good enough. And there's no obligation on the LEA to decide what is an acceptable reason. If the teacher gives a reason, that's a reason, and they don't have to pay the cost of the sub.
Policy committee.
Okay. So then that just puts a burden of accountability of listing or tracking on the school.
Really, it's not much I don't think it's a burden on anybody. It's just the teacher just has to take the step of listing a reason.
Okay. All right. That doesn't seem too hard.
Nope.
So
We're doing
down to letter F, that is where my question came back before about comp time. And it says, because professional employees are expected to fulfill all job duties, compensatory leave shall apply only in extraordinary circumstances. So it's telling us there that we can give salaried people. Well, I don't know if professional is another word, is code word for salaried or not, but that left me with a little bit of a loophole.
And I didn't read professional and certified, but they do use professional and certified in sort of interchangeably in other policies.
Yeah, and then
my understanding was that you don't give comp time to exempt employees.
Yeah, and the next line says employees who are not exempt from the provisions of the fair law may accrue compensatory time. So and I hate to argue with we're hoping that all of our employees are considered professional, because we expect that. So maybe we don't put professional. Maybe we put because employees are expected.
Now,
we could just that sentence is kind of confusing, and I don't really know what it's driving at. And I don't know of any circumstance where we do provide certified employees with comp time. And so I think we could just remove that sentence. And if they're exempt, or if they're not exempt, then we have to provide them comp time or overtime. So we don't have a choice. So I think that sentence is just a little confusing.
So just take it out.
I would strike it.
Yeah.
Everybody good with that?
I am.
Okay. So the last thing I had, and this is going to show up somewhere else, in another policy is under letter I, where we're talking about, right after the bona fide religious holiday, it lists all the different kinds of things that we could take leave for.
Yeah.
And do we really allow our employees to be elected officials?
They can. They
Okay.
could be in some circumstances.
Yeah.
Because I was under the understanding, well, maybe this was just old policy, that you definitely couldn't be a school system employee and be on the Board of Education.
That correct. But if somebody was, you could have some other type of, public elected role.
I had a social studies teacher who was a county commissioner once.
A substitute teacher?
No, I had a social studies teacher.
Okay. So let's just play that out for just a moment. If there are a boatload of meetings and responsibilities that elected officials have to take, and so your employer would have to be flexible with you to attend those during your workday, is that something that we would just handle in a procedure if we had an employee who was an elected official, to allow them to miss school, take leave, or do whatever? Is that something that we would entertain, or that we have to entertain?
Generally we sort of work that out.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not. We wouldn't be required to. I don't believe in most circumstances. There may be some that we might be that I'm not aware of, but I think in most circumstances they need to be our employee and they need to fulfill their job duties. But of course, I think our supervisors would try to work with them to make sure they could, if possible, to fulfill their other duties.
Okay, I'm good with that then.
There is and this obviously doesn't specifically say community responsibility, but we have there are other policies, participation in political activities. There's jury duty one. There's other policies that speak to some of those leaves, like military leave, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and some of those we're going to hear about. We're going to read about later in our stack.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So does anybody have anything more for that, for 7510?
No, ma'am.
All right. I'm going to put that one on the policies for first reading with some changes, because Colin was typing away, but we'll just have to make sure we get all those.
Hopefully he accidentally eliminated G.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Next policy, 7520, family and medical leave. Wow. That's a big one.
Yes, ma'am. Let's get the ball rolling with paragraph 1. There are basically 3 different ways that you can execute FMLA. There's sort of basically speaking to what makes the 12-month period. And we use, if you look in certain cases in any 12-month period, we would like to add in a rolling 12-month period. And that's one of the ways. I'm sorry?
That in the first paragraph?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
There are several different methods you can use, and we use a rolling 12-month period, which means an employee couldn't take FMLA from March to June and then July to September. It's in a rolling 12-month period. So once you take it in return, it starts the clock for a 12-month again.
Okay.
Okay.
Got that, Colin?
If you look under letter D.
Very good. Trainable.
There you go.
You'll need to insert the rolling word there as well, because it says the 12-month period during which an employee is eligible for just say the rolling. Somehow you need to put the word rolling in there.
I had a question on this one, and as just a question I've had, is FMLA, is that something that if we hired someone September 1st and they were, going to deliver in October. Is there a minimum time that they have to work for us before they can take FMLA, or is it?
Two people. He went that way.
Yes, if you look under, they have to work 1,250 hours prior to being able to access it.
1,250 hours.
Yeah.
And how come that is? Just because we need to make them, that basically is 6 months, right?
That's-
Yeah, for a full-time employee, because 2040 is, they have to have built up enough time in the seat before they can access time out of the seat, basically.
And that's just part of the federal legislation. That's great, Bill.
Okay.
Before they're eligible for it. And I actually don't have that policy. There was there's one sent to me labeled FMLA, but that was actually the voluntary shared leave. So if somebody else can write those changes down.
Okay. I'll write them down as best I can, and then I can compare with others. So we've got rolling in 2 places. So it's been a long time since I used family medical leave, but for childbirth. But family medical leave is paid, right?
It is paid if you have, so family medical leave usually will run concurrently with your sick leave. Family medical leave is not disability. It doesn't pay you. So you have to use your available leave.
Okay.
What family medical leave does is it protects your job,
Okay.
not your salary, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it
it's,
does.
yeah. It's
So-
not paid leave, but it does protect your job while you're out, and you can
Right.
use sick leave while you're out.
Now, if you
FMLA.
use sick leave, then everything stays as normal. The only other qualifier is if you're going leave without pay during FMLA, you will have to pay your portion of the health insurance. So if
Okay.
I don't have leave to cover that, I have to kick in my part of what the health insurance costs.
Okay.
And it's clear too in FMLA legislation that if you're on FMLA, it protects your job, but it doesn't necessarily protect your location.
Right.
So you're required to get a equivalent job back, not the same job that you left. So if someone was gone for 12 weeks in a science position, I may fill that science position because we don't want those kids to go for 12 weeks without a science teacher.
Right.
And then we would give them an equivalent position when they return.
So yeah, so somewhere in our later on down when it talks about the highly paid or the highly important, key people under N, that we don't have to hold them their same job at all. That's what I think I'm reading that. Key employees do not have the right to be restored to the same or an equivalent position upon their return. That is in letter N number 2.
Yep. So if I access FMLA, I wouldn't necessarily have the same protections that a teacher would have.
Okay.
And that's again tracking. That's just part of the federal regulations.
Okay.
And actually, that rider is in my contract.
Okay.
So I would assume it's in everybody's.
So let's just say that, Chris, you were out to have a baby, and
There's some
Yeah,
bigger problems there, but okay.
something, or one of our female staff was out to key people were out to have a baby. Is that like not discriminatory that I can't go out and have a baby and be a high level employee?
Well, and my contract basically states that if I'm unable to complete the duties of the job, so I would think that we would work with that, and that actually may reflect us back to the telework policy as well.
Okay.
So that may be a reason to explore that a little more closely, because obviously, for continuity purposes, we those things generally work out, but it's not a guarantee the way it is with our teachers and other staff.
Okay.
But in light of
that situation scenario were in place, to make sure that we aren't doing any type of discriminatory,
Right.
we would definitely, that's where we look at interim positions to make sure that the person can come back. And there's a whole bunch of things that we would work to make sure in conversations, because that would be the last thing we would want is, let's say someone, even a male who is going out for 6 weeks for family, for a wife who has had, or an adoption, they have those rights.
Adoption, right.
We would definitely not want to be discriminatory and say that, oh, well, we're going to go ahead and move you in. There would be some conversations that would take place.
Okay. Oh yeah, that one struck me as like, but I'm sure we would do it, but we don't have to.
This whole conversation makes me want to go get a physical.
Yeah. Just in case, right?
There were a couple other changes we wanted to make as well. If you would look at page 8, under M, there are times we would like to change that word will to the word may. So there are periodic, fairly rare, but you have sometimes where someone is maybe nearing retirement and they really want to save their sick leave because they're using it to reach 30 years or they may want their payout for their leave. We'd like to change will to may because we want the employee to have the choice if they want to go without pay versus using their leave.
And so tell me again where that was so I can catch up with that for Colin.
Letter M, number
I got M.
1.
Number 1.
The school system will support may substitute appropriate pay leave.
Gotcha.
Because we want the employee to have that choice. If they choose to take it without pay, that's their business.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then that was all the things we had on here. A lot of this really is guided by federal law. So those were the only changes we had.
And so, okay. So I'm just looking for at letter D. Do you want that the title to have determining the rolling 12-month leave period? You want rolling in there as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. The and like is continuing treatment, is that, could rehab be one of those kind of things like where you need to take 30 days to be in a rehab facility?
Yeah, and usually continuing treatment, like if we use the cancer suggestion again, there is intermittent FMLA leave where I may take leave over the course of a year, no more than 12 weeks, but it may be episodic, periodic leave. So I think that may be what that speaks to.
Okay. Question in letter E, number 5, where it says spouses employed by the school system, they can't take time at the same time. How come that is? They can't take FMLA at the same time.
I think it says it's limited.
For the birth. Yeah, I mean, it says that it basically, the way I'm reading it is that if I have a baby, my husband and my spouse and I cannot both take FMLA at the same time. We have to go like one after the other, or we're not even allowed to do one after the other.
I think what it says is their combined leave can't go longer than one person's leave. Is that what it reads, Colin?
Yeah, it reads something like, spouses who are both employed by the school system and eligible for FMLA leave are limited in the amount of family leave they can take for the birth, placement of adoption, to a combined total of 12 weeks or 26 weeks if leave to care.
So it doesn't mean they can't do it at the same time. It just means that event is combined together, if that makes sense. So she may take 9, I may take 3. They may happen concurrently, but we both can't take 12.
Okay. And how come that is? That's just
we're allowed. There's a regulation that allows us to do that.
Okay. All right. So we have to plan. when we're doing that. And then,
So after a couple weeks, my wife wanted me to go back to work.
yeah, please go to work. Yeah.
Right.
What is, what would be an example where we would have a 26 work weeks instead of 12 work weeks? Because it says that in a couple different places where, you know, total of 12 work weeks, or in parentheses, or 26 work weeks in certain cases. What would be a certain case?
That's if the person's military.
Okay. Okay.
Like it looks like it's just if a service member is injured in the line of duty,
Right. It's a covered. Yeah. Sorry.
I have extended FMLA to care for that person.
Yeah. It's a covered service member. So it's if the service member, if it's a covered incident for under FMLA for that service member, then they could have 26 weeks.
Okay. All right. Anybody got anything else?
I have a hypothetical. I know it's taken with the child. Let's just say, for instance, newborn has several health issues, life-threatening health issues. So does that also mean that the mom and dad, if they work here, they can only take up to 12? If
I would reflect us back to the previous policy, discretionary leave.
Okay, got it.
We could, that policy allows us to sort of shape that, and they could still use their sick time if they needed to. If the child was in critical care and both parents needed to be there, that policy would cover this issue.
Got it. That's good.
It wouldn't necessarily be covered under FMLA, but that's just not something we're going to get into with that.
Okay, got it. Just want to make sure.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go, I'm going to put 75-20 in the with changes, because we have a couple different places to insert rolling and to get that May in there. So is that okay with everybody to do that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's the way to do it. Yep.
Okay. So next policy is military leave, policy 7530.
This one's another one that's sort of locked down, so we didn't have any changes to it.
Yep. I didn't have anything on that one either.
Neither did I. Do it on up.
Okay, we're going to move that one straight over to policy for first reading. Next one is voluntary shared leave, policy 7540.
Okay. So I'll speak to the next policy. There are sort of two policies that are conjoined here, voluntary shared leave and sick leave bank. For voluntary shared leave, the only change we wanted to use was the purpose of voluntary shared leave is to enable employees who have exhausted all earned leave and continues to be absent. We would say all applicable. Instead of
applicable earned leave
we wanted to insert the word applicable
in front of earned.
Yes.
Okay.
Because technically we shouldn't force them to use their personal leave.
Well, I do have a question about that. So let's say someone has used all of their leave and then they have to take extended leave, but they have personal leave that they're not using. So I'm having to donate, or not having to, but I choose to donate, but I didn't realize that they had some time on the side that they could use.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same.
So if volunteer, I have, 250 days or hours or whatever it is, 250 days. And, my colleague has some personal leave. I don't know, but because that volunteer, that comes out often. We get that email often. And my question is, have they actually used all of their leave?
And that's our currently we don't require that. If we choose to require that, we can.
I would just think that before we go to another colleague, that person doesn't have any, like they've exhausted every form of leave that they have.
Okay. Hi, mommy.
Yes, back in a long time ago, New Hanover County Schools actually posted, Stephanie needs, 60 days. And does anybody want to contribute directly to Stephanie, then we could do it that way. And I guess maybe that shows up in the sick leave bank, if we even do it that way. But is that how it works? That, I say, hey, I want to give my sick leave, to Colin Shive. And so, or actually, can we only do personal leave? We can't share sick leave.
No,
What are we allowed to share?
You share sick leave.
But we can't share personal leave.
Correct.
And we can't share, is annual leave and personal leave the same thing?
No, it's different. So teachers don't get, teachers' annual leave is generally already built into the calendar.
Okay.
Spring break, winter break, so they don't really accrue their annual leave. Annual leave is 12-month employees, like people who work here at the central office. They don't get personal leave. They only have annual and sick.
Gotcha.
So anybody can share and share sick leave. And then annual leave is capped, and anything over 30 days, of annual leave rolls into sick leave.
Okay.
So basically share sick leave.
We can only share sick leave. And do I share that with an individual, or do I share that with the school system and you divvy it out? Or does that's actually 75-41?
The next policy is the one I actually want to remove, because we don't use a sick leave bank.
Okay.
We use this voluntary shared leave instead, which means it's an episode, it's a person, right?
Okay.
This person is out of leave and you donate to the person, not to a bank that gets used whenever.
And is it published, or do I just have to know that Colin needs sick time?
Generally, if someone is out of sick leave, the request goes to the principal of the school, will send it out, and then the bookkeeper collects donations, and then it goes back to the finance department.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like if someone here was in HR, I would donate that leave. I could donate leave for someone in my department. It's not usually district-wide.
Okay.
Y'all get an email. That's how I know.
But also, it's like I couldn't send it out, because the next paragraph here, someone might feel pressured or coerced.
So
I send something out,
So it's typically I'll say last week, it was coming from benefits. Someone in benefits sends it out to everyone.
Everybody in the district?
Everyone. Yes, I've gotten, I don't know, maybe 400, I'd say 400 being facetious, but I kept asking, I was like, why am I continuing to get an email for shared leave?
I am not in that email group. Let's keep that.
Wow. So someone wants my shared leave. Someone wants my leave.
I have never seen that email. I thought
I'll send it to you.
No, please, no. I stand corrected. I assumed it was dealt with on a school level. I don't, but there is obviously some way to communicate the need.
Yeah, like in the olden days, it was called the wave. It was analogous to the inside NHCS. It would be in there that Stephanie needs 185 days of sick leave, and then anybody who wanted to contribute. I don't know how it got managed, but I just remember reading that.
But it is there for employees if they need it.
Okay. All right. So, is this one good to move forward for? Colin, did you already make the change? Insert application.
No, we actually decided not to insert that.
Huh?
We actually chose not to insert that.
Oh, I wonder where I was. My brain was going to something else. Okay, so we're not.
The point was that we want to make sure that the tank is all the way empty before they access voluntary shared leave.
Okay, so 75-40 just goes forward as is. Okay, that's a good one. All right, so next one, 75-41. You want to delete that? I was going to suggest the same thing because I didn't think we used it, but
we don't.
Okay. So how do we capture that? Just in our minutes, we just say that we're declining it, or we don't even talk about it.
The board would need to vote to if it's currently part of board policy? I guess not.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Chris, was it? Let me look.
I don't think so.
No, according to McKenna, it had a 0, so we didn't have a current policy about it.
Okay, then there's nothing we need to do.
So not even mention it at all?
I mean, we could mention it to the board, just let them know, but the rest of the board know that we're not bringing it forward. but the board doesn't need to take any action.
Okay.
And it's an
No,
optional.
no action, not adopting. Okay. Okay. So next we have policy 7550, absences due to inclement weather.
And these are, weather is always such a challenging event. What we wanted to insert is after the word weather in the first sentence to put a comma, in coordination with their supervisor, comma, employees may exercise one of the following options. We wanted to insert sort of this concept that you talk with your supervisor, you guys decide which one of these we're going to do, and then we move on.
Okay.
So it would, the new one would read, pupils are not required to attend school due to inclement weather, comma, in coordination with their supervisor, comma, employees may exercise one of the following options.
Okay.
And that's just to increase and improve communication and efficiency.
Okay.
The rest of it was fine with us.
And so number 6 talks about teleworking. So we haven't really approved that one yet, but we know that that would be taken into account when we get to it, right?
Well, and I think that would actually, yeah, but that would probably be an emergency telework sort of option.
Okay.
But this only applies to days when employees can report when students don't. If we close everything down, that's not exactly what this is talking about.
Okay.
Because if you look at the bottom paragraph, that speaks to what happens when we just shut everything down.
The number 7 or the last paragraph?
The last paragraph underneath 7.
Okay.
That's when, so we close school. Dr. Faust really has 2 options. It's an optional work day for staff, or it's closed for everybody.
Okay. And then in the optional day for staff, then you go back up to 1 through 7.
1 through 7. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So we would, wait a minute. So in this one where we have number 6, is that the one we need to go back and revisit the language in that one? I just want to make sure that this one's not approved before we have gone back to revisit. I know what we were talking about with the working. Hurricane comes, can't come to school, but we can still work.
Right.
Just
right.
like we did with a couple weeks ago when
November
we couldn't go to the snow.
Yeah. Like that would be a day where my employees worked. They just did it from an alternate location. But that is referencing letter B in the telework policy, which is an emergency situation. So we probably shouldn't approve this one before we approve that one.
Well, and I agree with you, but I have brought this up a gazillion times that I don't want to approve policies that that reference a policy we haven't already approved. But that's been our practice going forward. But I certainly don't mind going back, because I don't like to approve policies that state another policy that we're having trouble.
That's why I would table this one as well.
Okay.
Yep, sounds good. Let's do that.
Hang on, I gotta put table.
75.
So that gives us a second one.
Just as a reminder, we will need to leave by 11:30 to get to the new teacher of the year.
Yes.
I
had planned on stopping at
rookie teacher of the year.
Yeah, I planned on stopping at 11:15 to start doing the voting so that we can, get it moved forward. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So 7550 we are keeping in policy. So now we're on permitted salary 7560, permitted salary deductions for absences and discipline of certain exempt employees.
All right, Colin, I've got a note here that says Dr. Barnes asked Colin about this, and I'm trying to remember what specific question I had for you. This is pretty standard language, isn't it, from the state board policy?
You're muted.
Thank you. Yes, I believe it is.
Okay, so
And this is also from state statute as well. And what most of the time this relates to is, NCAE and other employee groups. And your question was about paragraph 2.
yeah, I think what this says is, if I have leave for jury duty, I'm considered working during that time. But then this says that the school system will deduct from my pay whatever pay I got as a juror. So basically, we can't double dip, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it says we may do that. I don't know if we ever do that. I think we're legally allowed to, but I don't know that we ever have.
I think that was my question, actually, is that something we're going to bother to do? Because I think, if I remember right, jury duty pay is fairly nominal.
Yeah, and I'm not
$10 or something ridiculous.
I'm not familiar with districts doing that, but we're allowed to if we want to.
Well, I'm fine to leave it in there because it says may, which gives us the authority. I just don't know if that's something we would do.
Right.
Now, I think the other ones in there are appropriate, like B, during the initial or final week of employment, sometimes someone will suddenly stop coming to work. And so we can deduct from their pay if they don't work. There's several things in there. If you leave without giving your laptop back, those things are in there. That's fine. And I think I like the language that says you should be reporting improper deductions for yourself. And then everything else we were fine with. I just wasn't sure if we really needed that language in there if we're not going to do it, but it says may, so it seems okay.
So do we ever fine employees for infraction of safety rules?
No.
Letter C?
I've never experienced that so far.
Me either. I guess it's theoretically possible that could happen at some point.
All right, so just leave it in there because the law says we should.
Well, the law says we can, and you never know when you might need it.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Okay. All right, so 7560, is that good to just move right over?
I just needed that clarification. I didn't have any changes.
Okay, I didn't either. Pete, how about you?
No, looks good to me. Make sure I'm not muted. Yes, that looks good.
Okay, let's see if we can, we got 5 minutes. Let's see if we can get through like 2 more, and then I think that that will probably be enough, but let's just see. Salary schedule, 7,600.
We didn't have any concerns here.
I didn't have any concerns, but I had a question about that.
Okay.
So McKenna's notes to us that said that this policy is not part of our base manual, but was created to include the information from your old policy. So I went back and read the old policy, and it's basically all these same words. So do we need this policy? I mean, isn't it kind of obvious that we have to follow the salary schedules from the state, and that we only increase, with local dollars if we want to?
The only concern with this, and I don't think we're ever going to go backwards, but this says you are going to provide a supplemental salary.
Right.
Right.
And the county commissioners have control of that.
Right. That was my note to myself. How can we put in policy something that we're beholden to another organization, that we can say we're going to give everybody a supplement, but then we would have to budget for that.
I don't think this policy, well, obviously, School Board Association said it's not required, and I don't read the policy as saying anything other than we pay people according to the state salary schedule and we provide them a supplement.
Okay.
Now, of course, it doesn't specify the amount of supplement.
Right.
But it does sort of, it just seems like a strange policy to be in here. That's why we weren't sure what its goal was.
Well, I'm fine with the way it is. I just had that same question about that we will provide a supplement, and we don't know that we have the money, to do that, even though we'd hope we never get there. With this policy, salary schedules has nothing to do with the scheduling of how we pay them, like every 2 weeks or bi-monthly or monthly. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, we created it, but it doesn't speak to that. No.
Will that show up in a policy anywhere else? Or is that just an internal document?
I think that's just what we do. I don't see that there's a policy mandating how we pay, when we pay people.
Okay. All right. So do we want to move 7,600 over as is?
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
So the for payroll deductions, does that seem straightforward? You want to try that one, or do we want to stop?
I just got a couple of little things that I got from finance for this.
Okay, let's try and do that one, and then we'll stop.
Okay. Look at I did it again. Look at number 8. Tax shelter.
Letter 8. Okay.
Finance recommends after the 341, after that comma, just delete that.
Delete the 403B option.
Offered to the public school teachers and professional investment plan. I think that may be something that's going away. I don't know what her reasoning is, but that's what her recommendation was, to take that out.
Well, it refers to a statute. So can we do that, Colin?
I would defer to finance. I've heard somewhat recently that 403B option is going away. I don't know if there's anybody on the Zoom that can speak to that.
Let's see if I can find somebody.
I don't see it.
Doesn't look like we have anybody from.
And I just don't know this. I can't balance my checkbook.
They're in a conference.
Yeah. Why don't we, since we were vacillating back and forth whether or not to even tackle this one, why don't we start with this one next time, and that way we can have somebody from finance on there to answer questions.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah,
It is quarter after, so.
I just saw it was just announced a couple weeks ago that the 403B program is being discontinued.
Okay, then let's move forward. Let's do it.
Hang on, let me get back to it then.
Okay.
The other change that we wanted to look at was at number 13. And
The
that's
red 13?
Yeah, the red through 13. We would say any deduction for loans made to teachers by credit unions. I don't know if we need to specify Hanover Credit Union.
Yeah, because I had a question about that. I was thinking there's a lot of employees, use Corning Credit Union. So why wouldn't we? I mean, is it because we want to keep it to credit unions? Is that what the focus was? You think?
I think it needs to be credit unions in general, not specific to Hanover.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think back in my day, anyway, a lot of people went to the state employees credit union. So, yeah, I think any would be
That's
good.
number 12.
Oh, is it number 12? Okay.
That's
Yeah,
number
right in front of
12,
it. Jeez. Yeah, yep.
Well,
Well, why don't we
Hanover
combine-
Federal Credit Union has a statute next to it also.
But it's the same one as the
It's the
credit
same.
above.
Okay.
Yeah. You just say credit union deduction.
So it's any local teachers credit union.
Okay. Any local teachers.
So we would make that change in 13.
Okay.
Now, Colin, you've got double 13s there. You've got that.
Well, yeah. Well,
I
it's
see.
two on ours. It says 13, then to 14.
Yeah, so it's there.
It's a double 15.
Double 15, yeah.
Look under 16, you got the United Way contributions in there. That's right. That was all for us.
And this is just for clarification again, up in the very beginning, is that do we call our finance officer the chief financial officer, or do we call her finance officer?
I think we decided the school finance officer, didn't we?
School finance officer? Okay.
No, I think the school finance officer is like the bookkeeper.
I'm sorry. I know we went back and forth about this. I know we decided on something to refer to a person, but we didn't want it to be chief because I think the statute itself says school finance officer,
Okay.
and names, and organizational structures can change. But I can go back and look to see how
Go back and look
how
at
we,
some of our the Mary Hazel series.
right.
Okay.
I've got that on Netflix.
Yeah. And so I don't know if this is in here at all. Does New Hanover County Schools do any matching funds for any charities?
I would have to defer to Mary Hazel on that. I've never heard of any.
Because that would be another payroll deduction that could possibly happen. But okay, it's not that important. If we don't think we do it, then I'm guessing the school system wouldn't. It's more like for corporate America.
And number 17 speaks to NCAE.
Okay.
If I could just make sure
Spell that out.
It says employee professional organizations, I think. Employee
Dues or
associations.
contributions to employees associations
Yeah.
that meet the minimum membership requirement. So it doesn't say professional.
No, but it's an employee association.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move 7620 on with the change. Colin's going to look up the change.
And if I can recap,
Yes.
we're starting next time on 7635, return to work.
Yes. Yes.
And we tabled 7550 inclement weather and 75.
Hang on. I'm gonna go back through all that so we have to do an official accounting. But you are right on. Okay, so let's go back real quick. So Pete, I'm just gonna go ahead and make the motion and you can second, okay?
Sure.
All right, so first of all, we are policies that are held in committee will be 7503 telework and 7550 inclement weather.
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
and I approve that too. And hearing no dissent, then I will just assume that we're going to pass that through, so we don't have to have all these votes. All right, so policies for policies that we are sending on for amendment that do not need a first or a second reading will be policy 2300, 2330, 7360/8225, and policy 1610/7800. We move those forward for just amendment. Pete, give me a second.
Yep.
Okay.
Second.
All right. So hearing no opposition, we will move those forward. Policies for the first reading are going to be 7262, 7500, 7505, 7530, 7540, 7560, and 7600.
I actually had 7,500 moving on with revisions. So we had revisions.
7500.
Yeah, I may be wrong.
I think, well, hold on, because I thought that was, let me look real quick. Because I think we did talk about that. The main reason we went ahead and moved it on because all we had to do was, we had to put in 2 words. We had to change fiscal year and nominal. I can move it over to the changes. That's not a problem.
So then I second that list.
Okay, so 7,500, we're moving over to the other column. Okay, all right. So hearing no dissent, we're going to move those forward. So now policies for first reading with changes, revisions to be made by Attorney Shive. Policy 6140, 7510, 7520, 7620, and 7500.
And I had 1610. Is that not on there?
No, 1610. We're moving straight to for just an amendment.
Okay, gotcha. Fix that. Okay, I second.
Okay, so hearing no more discussion, we will do that. So, Dr. Barnes, does that get you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so we will start off at 7635 next time. Okay, so do I hear?
Move that we adjourn.
Okay, I second. Hearing no dissension, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Have a
all.
great day.
Bye.